So when we talk about subconscious behaviors, this is when a person is stuck and they've tried the habits to break through and they cannot continue. Usually that happens because their brain literally is wired for self-sabotage. And when I say wired, it is. We have nervous connection in our brain, neurons that fire, wire. If you go into the forest and you're trying to make a very thin walk through the forest, it's going to be hard and it's going to take you a long time. If you cut a few trees down, it's going to be easier. If you put a highway, you'll go very fast. Our brain works on synaptic highways. And if you have a highway of there's something wrong with me, because that's been programmed into your brain, and you hear a voice that says, just being you is good enough to be great.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hirsch Redpun, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. On Truth Tastes Funny today, my guest is Victoria Rader, Ph.D. She is a possibility coach, transformational speaker, founder of Why You To Shine, right? Why You To Shine. You to shine. You to shine. What is it? It's you to shine.
You to shine. But you know what? If it's why you, it's why you.
Why you shine. Why do you two shine? Why you two? Why is it always you two that shine and not me two? Me too shine. You two shine. That's right. Nomenclature is wonderful, but it doesn't solve the mysteries of life. I would say Victoria is an expert in possibility. She is a master of the unpredictability of life and also the mindset portion and what is possible when we set our minds to it and what is within our grasp. Victoria, welcome to Truth Tastes Funny.
Thank you so much, Hirsch. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I want to talk about your books. I want to talk about, because you're a many times over a successful author and have shared your knowledge with your audience. But why don't you give us a little capsule vision of You to Shine?
You to Shine was born as a company in 2013 out of a very private vision of finding myself in a sheer darkness at a time with my health, my relationship, my business, my finances. If you picked an area in my life, one thing it was lacking was any kind of light or enlightenment. It was a lot of struggle leading up to it for many years. And, just months, or I should say years prior to that, at the kind of depth of that anguish, I was woken up with a very clear internal statement that you got to stop fighting the darkness. All you need to do is turn on the light. And it became a passionate seeking and searching for what that meant. What does it mean to turn the light on? And that is how the company was born, having found what that meant to me, seeing how, regardless of not knowing what it was, I've always tried to do it in my life, and then systemizing it and allowing people that find themselves at a point of either sheer anguish and darkness or kind of a cloudy, I don't know where I'm going, I'm in the middle of the mist situation, to find the light, to follow the light, and most importantly, to be the light they've come to be. So that is the vision that we have for our company, and that it has been over a decade.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I think, there is no limit to adversity. Let's put it that way. It's there wherever you turn. Like I was telling you before the show, this show was born out of the pandemic and a desire to cope and a desire to hear stories of coping. And boy, have I gotten that. And I think I was even surprised by the level of depth that immediately happened with this show. I'm a comedian. I have done my share of telling jokes, and of course there's no jokes without truth and vice versa. But I feel like the inspiration that has come from this show has been astounding. Do you feel, because you were coming from this very dark place where everything seemed to be disjointed, let's say, or out of sorts, that you've discovered that life need not be so hard? Or is it that there are waves that are hard? Like, where do you put difficulty in the puzzle of life?
What I've discovered for myself and has had the joy truly to be empowering others in at this point, Hirsch, is rather simple. And the simplicity of it is that when there's no limit to infinite possibilities, there's no ceiling of possibilities, there's also no floor to probability of misery. It goes both ways, and it
Yeah.
isn't, and it is infinite. And so what I've come to understand with its maximum simplicity is good old words of Shakespeare. Shakespeare said, to be or not to be, that is the question. It's a very profound statement, because at any given point, no matter how blissful your life is, there are things that are not working. And at any point, no matter how harsh your life is, there's a miracle that is happening within you, for you, through you, or around you. And the simplicity was that all I have to do is to monitor which filter am I perceiving my reality through? Am I perceiving it through the reality of suffering and grief? Or am I perceiving it through a reality of gratitude and joy? The reality is truly becoming irrelevant, highly irrelevant, if you understand that the switch is internal. The dimmer and the switch are both internal, they're not external.
And that's tremendously empowering, I guess, because if you can say, look, I cannot control the events, but I can control my reaction to them, and I can decide if this is tragic. I can decide if this is insurmountable or surmountable, or if it's a good thing. But we also know that a lot of times with mindset and perspective, intellectualizing something doesn't always make it work for us internally. What have you found works best, marrying the mind and the
Yeah.
heart, or however you want
Yeah.
to.
And information does not cause transformation, right? Without
Right.
implementation, information is just useless. It truly is. And so what I've come to develop for myself as a coping, I call it coping into joy system, right? You got to cope into joy.
Yeah.
And I'll give a very vulnerable example. Before the show, you and I were talking, is that I'm originally from Ukraine. I was born there. I grew up in the former Soviet Union. I went to school in Ukraine shortly after it became independent. And so, there is in personal development industry where I'm in, there is this hero journey that's driving me crazy. And what I mean by that, the hero journey is life was tough, and then I've learned my lessons, and then I overcame, and now live happily ever after. And I'm going to tell everybody how to do it. Like, where do I go puke? I mean, where do I go puke? Because this hero's
Yeah.
journey is you wake up in the morning and you start your journey every single day. And so, for me, using an example that was very shocking to my system was the first call I got of a civilian relative who was brutally murdered, who was killed
Oh,
for,
yeah.
for no other reason. Will not give the details of that. Don't know who the audience is. But getting a phone call, and the first normal reaction is feeling completely hopeless and helpless. And that mindset, a victim mindset, life is happening to me. This has just happened to me. There's a wave of grief and helplessness. And it's very important to validate it. I feel completely helpless. It happened to me. And the next step out of powerlessness is going to be that power hunger, reclaiming your power by saying, okay, if it happened to me, it's because it was also happening for me. And that is where you have Tony Robbins or Les Brown, how did it happen for me? Okay, it happened for me to once again remember the meaning of life. It happened for me to learn to heal, to learn to apply the skills I have to release the grief, all of those things. But then if you get stuck at how it happened for me, you create a pretty greedy, self-centered, narcissistic society, which we have done. Because most of us in a personal development are running around claiming the universe now works for me. And so it all happens not to me, but I'm a strong, powerful person. It happens for me. But I think the real transformation comes when you say, wait a minute, it did happen to me. And I'm grateful that I found out that it was also happening for me. But now I'm going to ask, and how do I go forward with this happening through me? And so in
Mm.
my life, it happened, I lost her. How did it happen for me? I'm going to be grateful for my life. I'm going to recommit to what life is with all the death that I've witnessed. And how do I impact it through me? And within 48 hours, we've launched a clothing line with 100% profits going to Ukraine, to orphanages. 48 hours, right? Just branding it with Free Me Ukraine stuff, and we ran it until we were shut down because we were not nonprofit. So there you go. Good
Right.
things. No good deed goes unpunished. And it's a daily thing, right? It's not like, oh, and since then, Harsh, I've been empowered and I've been shining my light brightly. It's every single day.
Actually, you make a really good point there, Victoria, which is that this whole process happens every day, right? So it is, and I totally agree with you. It can be inspiring and uplifting to hear the hero's journey story and feel like I can do that. If they can do that, I can do that. But the idea that it then is perfect, and then by affirming every day that it's perfect and it's wonderful and it's going to be perfect is, it's a wonderful attitude to have. But what about that? What about the rest of it? And so you make a really, really good point about how do I experience it through me. And, in the people that you've been working with, tell us a little about the books, because not everybody writes a book, not everybody writes, 5 or more. So tell me about your author's journey.
I love that you said authors and not a writer, because I tell people there's very big difference between being an author and being a writer, right? Because as a writer, you must write. It's like breathing to you. My brother is a writer. He does nonfiction. I think he's had 30 books. He cannot live but write. That's
Mhm.
not me, it's not me. I'm an author. I have an idea. It burns in my heart. And then I started discomfort of conveying the idea to
Yeah.
touch somebody else's heart, right? So I loved the author journey. And the way it actually started for me it was a journey of self-discovery. When I first came to the United States, I married my husband. We had 2 kids, and I was speaking Russian, Ukrainian to my kids. English was their third language. And when the time came for my daughter to go to school, her English wasn't good enough. So we figured I needed to homeschool her to catch her English up. The problem was, after a year of homeschooling, she was 3 grades ahead. And so we had this
Wow.
dilemma. I either have a kid who is ahead intellectually, putting emotionally into a higher group of kids, which makes no sense, or hold her back. So I started homeschooling, right? It was a verdict, it was less of a choice and more of a verdict.
Yeah.
And because I love traveling, I had this brilliant idea. I was going to go to Greece. My kids were 3.5 and 7, but 4 and 7.5, and study Greek history on site for
Mm.
3 weeks. Had a phenomenal time. We've just no stone left unturned. Came home, had my mom with me. My husband sat me down and he said, sweetheart, I'm thrilled about this homeschooling model. I know in Ukraine you don't have credit cards, but this little plastic thing you've been swiping, it put us in debt. There's nothing attached to it. So, jokes aside, I Googled what's the fastest way to make money in the US while homeschooling your kids. This is 2007. Real estate is hot. Homes are flying off the shelves. I throw myself into real estate education and join the real estate by 2008 when the market crashes. So to make a
Yeah.
very long story short, by 2009 and 10, I'm in the top 1% agents in US and Canada, number 70 US and Canada for my brokerage, while I never work on Sunday because it's my sacred day, while I homeschool my kids, and while I travel the world. So people start asking me, what is your secret? What is it that you're doing? So the first book, Until You Win, was the answer to that. It was, these are the 7 things that I do, and this is how I understand it. And then the follow-up books were, there is more to that than what meets the eye. There's more to that than the conscious habit of success. There's more to it than forceful will while sobbing at night, getting yourself out of the bed and working hard. There is more to that because there were those that worked me. There were those that outsmarted me, and yet I was performing and they were not. So that led me to get my PhD in metaphysical sciences and study subconscious, study energy modalities, and find the answer. So all the subsequent books were, now this is a full vision. These are universal laws. This is how reality is created consciously and subconsciously. That's a very long answer to how books came to be.
No, it actually, well, it covers a lot because it covers the big picture of the solutions that you tapped into. Not everything can be solved by a, metaphysical approach and mind expanding work and going into your personal history. There's also the very practical elements of life that one deals with. But speaking of hypnosis and some of the other, what would we call those sciences,
Modalities.
the modalities, yeah, the various modalities. Tell us a little bit about that and the power of that.
Absolutely. I think to add framework and clarity of where somebody is that in every area of our life, we'll be in one of the four stages. We're either in survival or in stability, in success or in significance. You can be in survival in your marriage and in significance at your job. You can be in survival in your money and in success at your career. So knowing where you are in each area then tells you what to do, because out of survival into stability is a change of habits. Out of survival into stability, change of habits. Now, out of stability into success is the change of mindset. And out of success into significance is the change of heart. Most people are stuck because they're trying to go out of survival into significance, and they don't understand the gradation of these things. So when we talk about subconscious behaviors, this is when a person is stuck and they've tried the habits to break through and they cannot continue. Usually that happens because their brain literally is wired for self-sabotage. And when I say wired, it is. We have nervous connection in our brain, neurons that fire, wire. If you go into the forest and you're trying to make a very thin walk through the forest, it's going to be hard and it's going to take you a long time. If you cut a few trees down, it's going to be easier. If you put a highway, you'll go very fast. Our brain works on synaptic highways. And if you have a highway of there's something wrong with me, because that's been programmed into your brain, and you hear a voice that says, just being you is good enough to be great, you will have an allergic response to that. You will feel somebody is mocking your pain, doesn't understand you, doesn't know what they're talking about. And that is the only normal response, because your highways have no capacity to know that that is true. So the very first thing that I usually do with my clients, instead of introducing the concept, ask a question. What if it were possible? I know you believe it's not possible right now, but what if it were? What would you do then? And we shift the questions. So with subconscious mind, all of these different modalities are there in a nutshell to rewire your brain for new performance highways. There's no right or wrong modality. They're all absolutely excellent. Some of them are better for thought patterns, such as theta healing. Some of them are better for emotional patterns, such as emotional freedom technique, and release. The reason I am certified hypnotist, I do not do hypnosis, is very simple. I mentioned I love universal law. I love the law of free agency. When you hypnotize, you don't have a choice. The suggestions are rewiring your brain, and you perform according to suggestions. And so I prefer working with a person who's fully aware, and this is where your laughter comes in, because the second a person laughs, their brain slows down and it goes into a theta brainwave. And so the brilliant speakers, will use the phenomenal joke to deliver a teaching. Because when the brain is laughing, when the person is laughing, the brain is in a theta brainwave, which is a brainwave used to rewire your programming. And so when they say that, laughter is the best medicine, it actually is. Because when you laugh, your brain gets into a healing mode. And so theta healing, for example, is the modality that works with the brain by slowing it down to a theta brainwave.
That's perhaps the most eloquent explanation of laughter being the best medicine that I've heard, including, the humor makes the truth digestible, which is what I've been saying for years. But I think the framing of it as a delivery system for learning is amazing, because we all know that funny teachers to TED Talks to, that laughter, also that release of tension that comes with the laughter sets the stage for our receptiveness to what's being shared. And so I think that's why it never came as a surprise to me that comedians were in many ways the philosophers of their age, because they were able to impart things that a philosopher, just as they are, couldn't really get across without the humor, without that twist, the little bit of irony or untruth or exaggeration that's layered on top of something that's completely true and reasonable. And that's what gets us. And I think it's what saves us in a lot of ways, which is where I wanted to go next, which is the world that we live in today. There's a lot of universal challenges that everybody's facing. I mean, obviously, untold numbers of people are impacted by every single thing. So Ukraine is a perfect example. The number of people impacted by every phase of this struggle. Same with the pandemic. Same with anything that upheaves us. Natural disasters. The ripple effect of life, of the world on our lives is a staggering thing to even wrap our head around. Do you talk with people about that, about managing the universal intensity of being a citizen in the world?
I think it goes back to knowing your role. You do not need to be responsible for the outcome. The beauty of desire for world peace is, as long as you're at peace, world will be fine. And if every one of us focused on, wait a minute, if I'm actually peaceful and not pissed at somebody who's not,
Yes.
maybe, just maybe. And so for me, it all goes back into as within, so without. And it truly, truly is. Who was it that said to be the change you want to see in the world, right? And, was
Right.
it Gandhi, I think, that said it? And so, be the change you want to be in the world, and the world will change. It'll have no other choice if each one of us will choose to be the inner light that we've come to be. And I think, right now, speaking of humor, the number of memes that have been born through the years,
Yeah.
now almost 2 years of the war for me, it is just incredible. But it's knowing the difference between laughing at something and laughing with someone. And I
Yeah.
think that is the difference of laughter. There's laughter that builds and encourages and empowers. And there's a pretend anger that mimics as laughter and deceives and harms and hurts. And I
Yeah.
think in our heart, we know the difference, and
Yeah.
then sometimes you do laugh yourself into tears because the truth comes through and you never had it accessible. You had to laugh to the depth of it. And in that vulnerability, we want to be protected from mockery. So that is that very thin line, I think, that laughter opens for us to walk, and it could be a healing balm or a rather destructive force. So
Yeah, well said. I think as a comedian, I can say that, we recognize perhaps more than anyone else the distinction, because we know the science of comedy and the pull and release of it and what it all means. And the idea that it is truly at the expense of someone else or that it would cause pain is really anathema to the notion of comedy. And sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes, a comedian can say something that's hurtful. Sometimes I think that a lot of comedians don't realize that they're actually saying something at the expense or at the hurt of an audience or somebody in the audience. Most of the time we kind of take on this collective vulnerability, like we're all fallible. If I'm going to talk about someone else being fallible, somewhere in that story is going to be my own fault or my own fallibility, or the joke will be on me. But it really isn't comedy if someone gets hurt. That's really the truth. It just isn't. It's not about ribbing people or busting their chops or whatever. That stuff is, I have some of my best friends that are, that we just banter with one another and we belittle one another jokingly, and it's so affectionate and so the opposite of hurt that, it's we know what we're doing. But speaking of the opposite of hurt, let's bring this back around to love, which you define as life originating, vibrant emotion, correct?
Yes, very much.
Yeah. So, because I like that. I like, bridging the gap of judgment through love. Can you kind of bring this interview around to some thoughts on that?
I think love is overthought and underappreciated. So the word emotion comes from Latin emovere, which is disturbance or movement. And so emotion is energy in movement. That's all it is. It takes energy to laugh. It takes energy to cry. There's different waves of energy. And so love to me truly is life originating, vibrant energy in motion, because if it adds to life, to quality of life or to quantity of life, it is love. And if it subtracts from it, if it destroys it, doesn't matter what words come with it, it no longer is. And I think we overthink it. But if every day, on the journey of self-improvement or growth or expansion, whatever language you would use, if you just ask yourself, what's the most loving way to handle this? You will come upon so many discoveries and miracles. I mean, I know I have. Because a lot of us live under a premise that we cannot deliver the truth, speaking of the truth, because of these subconscious paradigms of harsh truth or brutal truth. Who said truth is brutal? Truth is pure love. If it's brutal, it's ego looking for being right. Nothing more. There is the pure truth has nothing but love. Now, our inability to express that truth is what we've come to work on, I believe, as human beings. But if you understand that true love means love for you, through you, and for others without sacrificing yourself for them, that you are to add life to you, through you, to all of those around you, very high mandate, but that is, for me, the core of truth of who we are and who we've come to be. Because some of us are trained that the way to be loving is to self-sacrifice, and as a result, we enable monsters around us because we're throwing ourselves under their feet for them to walk on, and then we resent it. When I was homeschooling mom, I've had a lot of parents say, oh, I'm doing this for my kids. I've done it for you. And I'm thinking, stop, don't. Go to work. Send them to kindergarten. Do not put your self-sacrifice as a guilt burden on your child. Either do it because it brings you most joy with most challenge, or don't do it because it harms both of you equally. So that to me is what love is. There is always a solution that is most expensive for all involved. Not always very easy to find it, but always there.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.